Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Knapik. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Knapik, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Knapik is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Knapik, and today with the one and only Johnny Carrabba. You know him here in Houston and well beyond. He is the great restaurateur with many restaurants to his credit. Mr. Carrabba, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
And one of your biggest fans. I love to eat no matter where I go. I think about your restaurants all over town. Let's tell people about your beginning story. People know the restaurant Carrabba's, of course. People know your family and everybody else. So let's tell them about your story, Johnny.
Bill, cut me off when you need to, but it's kind of an interesting story, I think. First of all, I've been very blessed. My grandparents and my parents had a small neighborhood grocery store on the east end side of Houston called Carrabba's Friendly Grocery. My dad was the butcher. My grandmother was the cashier. Then my mother took over, and my grandfather was mostly, taking care of like a little rent property here and there, So I was raised in a family neighborhood business, on Canal Street in the east end side of Houston. And that taught me a lot about, family businesses. But then I was very fortunate because my mother has three brothers. And their names were Vincent Mandola, Tony Mandola, and Damien Mandola. And they happened to be in the restaurant business. And I have to give a lot of my story to a lady by the name of Ninfa Lorenzo. My uncle Tony Mandola was dating and ended up marrying Ninfa's daughter. And so when she started Ninfa's on navigation, then my uncles opened up their own little restaurant. So she gave us the hope, that we can make it in this business. And, I worked for all my uncles. I went to college, wasn't much of a student. Went to St. Thomas High School, coached there for a couple years. Went to college for about 6 years, and finally my parents cut me off. Still a little upset about that. I don't know why they cut me off after 6 years and no degree. But I wanted to be an accountant, I thought. But while I was in college and while I was coaching at St. Thomas High School, my uncles would always call me, hey, we need a bartender, Johnny. We need a waiter. And I happened to be working in one of my uncle's restaurants, Tony Mandola's Blue Oyster Bar on Gulf Freeway. And I was working there with my grandma, Grace Mandola, who was legendary in the business. And he said, man, I just signed a lease on a second location on Shepherd Drive near Cadillac Bar and Pizzatola's Barbecue, which is a cousin of ours. Anyhow, to make a long story short, I ran that as a young guy, and I ran it like it was mine. And my Uncle Tony, gave me his blessing, and he did me a favor, man. He let me run it.
And what year was that, Johnny?
That was about 1983.
Wow.
82, 83. And then one night I'm working my little restaurant called Tony Mandola's Blue Oyster Bar number 2, and one of my other uncles came in to eat with me after he closed down his restaurant, which is Damien's on Smith Street, which is a very good restaurant, still in the family. My cousins run that. But Damien came in one night and said, man, I have a great idea, and explained to me, what he had just went to New York, and he saw these restaurants and open kitchens and wood-burning pizza oven, pasta in bowls, pizza, and real fun and casual. And he looked at me, and he said, do you want to do it with me? And I was really flattered. But I was at a crossroad because I felt like he was recruiting me, and he was recruiting me from my uncle and his brother. But
family business, yeah.
It's a family business, and that's why family businesses are so tough, generally.
Sure.
But then we started looking for locations, and, we're native Houstonians, so we kind of know where we thought it would work. And we found Ed Wolf, the realtor in town, found us a location, and it was called the Kirby Newsstand, 3131 Kirby. And it was a dirty bookstore, whatever you want to call it. And it was a 3,000 square foot building. And this is where the journey starts, though.
This is the beginning of Carrabba's.
This is the beginning, and I think it's a pretty interesting story to especially young people to never give up. But this was in 1986, which is the worst economic times in Houston history. The last thing a bank wants to do is lend to restaurants. But really more than that, they don't want to lend to restaurants in bad economic times like we were, back in 1986. So the first bank we go to is the bank that my grandfather and my dad did business with, called Harrisburg Bank, on the east end side of Houston. And we went to go talk to our family friend, Chip Allen, who was the president. And we went through our spiel trying to sell it on him, and he gunned me down, And he was probably telling me for my own good. It's just when the right time for it. But when you're young, and you're full of...
When you're young, the right time is then.
Yeah, there's an old saying, and I probably shouldn't say it on the radio, but, when you're young, you're kind of full of, vinegar.
Right, sure.
And I know that doesn't sound real professional today, but that's about the way I look at it. And I said, oh, what does he know? Because I was young. I was 27 years old. I said, what does he know? So he knew something, because number 2 bank turned us down. Number 3 bank turned us down. 9 banks had turned us down. And we're about running out of banks in Houston, Texas in that time, because most of them were closing
And
up.
I would think the enthusiasm is starting to dampen at this point, but you kept going.
Well, again, I said this is where the story begins. I was learning how to cook at Damien's restaurant, down there on Smith Street, downtown. And I just happened to be walking through the dining room one day, and a man stopped me. And he goes, hey, Johnny. And I really didn't know who he was at the time. And I said, how are you doing? And he said, hey, how's your new deal working out? And first of all, he introduced me to an associate of his that was sitting at the table. And he said, how's your restaurant coming along? I said, oh, sir, I don't think it's going to happen. I said, we've had like 9 banks turn us down. And he goes, well, hold on for a second, son. And he reached in his pocket. He gave me a card. And it said Rhonda Lewis on it, Chief Loan Officer at Omni Bank. He goes, I'm on the board of this bank over there on Old Spanish Trail, OST as Houstonians call it, behind University of Houston. He goes, go see Rhonda Lewis and see what she can do for you. Well, that was my first break. We walked into our 10th bank, which was the Omni Bank, and meet Rhonda Lewis, and we didn't know her from Adam. But when we introduced ourselves, she gave us a hug. And Damien and I were perplexed. We didn't know, how do we know this woman? We didn't know. We tell her our spiel, Bill, and that kind of rhymes, spiel, Bill.
Yeah,
but we give her our little spiel, and she says, guys, I'm going to let you know I like your idea. She goes, our bank loves to lend to family-owned businesses, and especially we love to lend to native Houstonians, people that are embedded in the community. She goes, but I have a little bit of an issue. And Damien, who's mostly the spokesperson, goes, well, what's the issue? She goes, Johnny, me and my fiance come into the Blue Oyster Bar a lot, and we see you there working. And we love that little restaurant. And she goes, and Damien, your restaurant is our favorite restaurant. That's where my fiance proposed to me at. She goes, so who's going to be running this thing? And that's when Damien said, it's going to be Johnny's restaurant to run. I'm going to run Damien's. I'm going to set him up with recipes and decor and things like that. And I'm going to support him, but it's his restaurant to run. And it's going to be called Carrabba's, which is my last name. Damien's last name was Mandola. And she called us back. That was a Monday. She called us back on Thursday and said, call me back because I'm more the business-minded person, I would think. And she said, we can give you the money, but you need to come up with $100,000 worth of collateral. Well, back then, $100,000. That's a
lot of money.
It was $100,000 more than I had. So Damien, being the thinker, he goes, well, hey, man, call your parents. And so I didn't want to do that, but I called my dad. And the reason I didn't want to do it is because I saw how hard my parents had to work in that grocery store with a half a pound of bologna, selling penny bubble gum. It was, like I said, a small little place. And I didn't want to risk their hard-earned money. But we met with my dad. As all great Sicilian deals are done, they're done at the dining room table. And we met with my dad, and we formed our partnership. And we opened up on December 26th. And, Bill, I've mentioned to you this before, but on December 25th, which is naturally Christmas Day, we had a family gathering. I was sitting next to my dad. And I asked my dad, I said, Dad, do you have any money on you? And he wanted to know why, because he was, pretty close to his money. And I said, because, man, we're going to open up the restaurant tomorrow. He goes, I know you're going to open up the restaurant tomorrow, December 26th, right? And I said, yeah. I said, but I don't have any money to open up the cash registers. And my dad gave me $500 later on that afternoon. And, we opened up. Since my family has like a little bit of notoriety in the city and restaurants, we opened up kind of nicely. The first party we had was for Mr. Minchin's. He has twin sons, and we threw a party for his twins. And then we opened up for business later on. But, again, I can keep talking. But the thing that I always try to tell my young people, because I still do the final hiring and I still do orientations in my business for a reason. But I let them know that the sky's the limit if you work hard, number one. But the other thing is you never know who's going to control your destiny. Because I just happened to be walking in a restaurant and Mr. Minchin recommended Rhonda Lewis. I never knew who Rhonda Lewis was as a customer.
And that's right. We don't know those things. We don't know, but we know that we have to put ourselves in positions to have opportunities. And usually that's done. You got to leave the house. You got to go places where people are. And that's right. Anyone can track their lives to say, boy, if I didn't meet this person or that person, and why was I even out at that place that day? So it's really a great lesson that, yes, don't give up. Be out there, and opportunities, if you work hard, those opportunities are going to unfold, no doubt about it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. First of all, like you say, you don't know who's controlling your destiny. And I have a couple other things to add to that. I was reading an article on Joe DiMaggio, the great center fielder for the New York Yankees. And the article said, he was a little egotistical. He's really into himself. But his quote was, I play the game of baseball hard every play because there might be somebody in the stands that paid good money for the ticket. They've never seen me play, and I want to impress them. So I think that, when you're going through life, you're going to have ups and downs, but what I think is important is you engage yourself and you play the game hard every day because, again, you never know who's watching you. And the story gets even a little bit better. So we open up the first location. About a year later, Damien calls me up and said, Johnny, I think you need to open up a second location. Let's do it again. But I wasn't thinking that way because I was thinking like my ancestors who were immigrants, Sicilian immigrants, and they ran one business for all of their life and they handed it down to their children. Well, it's just like my grandfather and my dad at the grocery store. I just thought that I was going to operate this one little restaurant just like my ancestors did. And Damien had the vision, to go open up a second location. And we went into a location at Woodway and Voss with Mr. Ed Wolf, Wolf and Company Realty. And
I eat there all the time.
Bill, you don't know this. So he told me, he goes, give me 2 weeks to think about it. You got to be strategic. I didn't know what strategic meant. He goes, you got to, can't be too close to the original location, too far away. And he goes, give me 2 weeks to think about it. Well, about an hour later, he could have taken 20 years to find a location because I didn't know how I was going to work any harder. I was working 7 days a week back then. And he called me up an hour later and he goes, Johnny, he goes, I have the location for you. I said, well, where's that at, Mr. Wolf? He goes, the corner of Woodway and Voss. And I said, with all due respect, because I was a young guy and he was, probably in his 50s at the time. I said, with all due respect, I said, have you lost your mind? I said, there's been 4 restaurants go broke there in 15 years. He goes, no, Johnny boy. He goes, there's been 5 restaurants go broke in 13 years. I said, well, why is that a good location? And we opened up, and it was pretty much, he called it a slam dunk. And my mother's still there running it 28 years later, doing great. But then the rest of the story is that one day I started getting phone calls from people that, had money in the River Oaks district and wanted to invest in us. But I really wasn't interested in that because they had the money, but, I understood Carrabba's, but I didn't know how to grow. And I didn't really want to grow. Just being that little bit of a Sicilian, Italian.
And going back to the idea of you're working as hard as you can, but now it seems like you're developing the idea of leadership. You're learning how to delegate, to be able to reproduce like you reproduce a recipe from one place to the next. You're able to put systems in place and procedures.
Exactly. But one day I started getting other restaurant companies calling me. But then one day, I never forget, it was by 11 o'clock on a Monday. And the hostess came up to me and said, Johnny, there's a Mr. Tim Gannon on the phone for you from Outback Steakhouse. I'd never even heard of Outback Steakhouse. So I said, just take a message for me. But something said, go ahead and knock that phone call and get it out of the way so you don't have to return the phone call later on when I might want to have like a little 30-minute lunch break, right? And I got to the phone and Tim Gannon, yeah, Johnny, you don't know me, but I used to live in a garage apartment on Sunset over there in West University. He goes, and I was living in a friend's garage apartment, dead broke. He goes, and I used to love your restaurant. He goes, but our CEO, he was, Tim was one of the founders of Outback, but the CEO and founder, Chris Sullivan, who is like, my biggest mentor besides my parents and my uncles, he said, but Chris Sullivan, we're at about 60 units, 60 restaurants, and we need another growth vehicle. And Chris Sullivan came to me and said, we want to buy into an operating restaurant. Who do you like? And Tim Gannon goes, there's a little restaurant in Houston, Texas called Carrabba's on Kirby Drive. He said, love the food, love the hospitality even more. He goes, that's the reason I'm calling you. And I said, well, Tim, I said, man, I'm really flattered, but I'd like to tell you, man, we're going to stay just family owned and operated.
Yeah, we're fine like we are.
We're fine, good two little restaurants. But he said, Johnny, these guys changed my life. He goes, they're the real deal. He goes, and I have a little motto. It never hurts to talk.
I like that motto.
Yeah, it never hurts to talk, does it? I mean, talking can't hurt you unless you say something bad. But the next day, they're in Houston, Texas, and we had dinner. And then we formed a joint venture partnership. And so just to add on to Ralph Mention or to Rhonda Lewis, I never knew that we were waiting on Tim Gannon, who really controlled the biggest part of our fate. Because that thing has really expanded into a big business, nice business.
And let's recap. Going back to Kirby Drive, that location, at that point, it's kind of monumental because now you have like a restaurant empire there with Carrabba's, Grace's, Mia's, where I saw you the other day to invite you on the show. That is so awesome. And now, how many Carrabba's, as a result of the Outback Steakhouse, how many are out there in the United States?
Well, there's 240 domestic restaurants, and there's 10 in Brazil. But in the international locations, we call them abbraccio, because Carrabba's in Brazil, they speak Portuguese, and Carrabba's is like a slang word, and so they call it abbraccio. But they just opened up their 10th one this week. We're getting ready to open up in Saudi and in Dubai. And
unbelievable.
Yeah, and again, it's not easy. I mean, all of our companies always need work, but when you think about going back to 9 banks turning us down.
What a story.
Yeah,
it's
for me
totally...
borrowing money, Bill, but for me borrowing money from my dad, and so again, man, we're real proud of it. We just celebrated our 30th year in business, and I'm real proud of my people more than anything.
And when we think about family as the genesis of your profession and business, family is so important. But you mentioned it also, food and family and business. And restaurants are so important because it's a food that's part of our lives. We do business deals at restaurants. People know about restaurants as travelers are out there. We all have our favorite restaurants when we're in this city or that city. Food is just so important. And each dish that comes out is also so important as the restaurateur, right?
Yeah, the way I look at it is, and I've always said this, restaurants are personal. A good restaurant is very personal. The Kirby location is near River Oaks Country Club. My Woodway Voss location is near Houston Country Club. And I'm always telling my staff, these people feel like they're members of Carrabba's, and they feel like they have a sense of ownership of the restaurants. It's personal. I've seen 3 generations go through our restaurant where, I don't know, it's just part of America, you know what I mean, of just going out to eat and having fun.
It really is. And also now we haven't mentioned Common Bond. Now, I just was at Common Bond yesterday, and a couple things that strike me. The food was delicious. I had the beef bourguignon. And first of all, I don't know how many places you can get beef bourguignon, but you can get it there, and it was incredible. What a great dish. I want to go back there for breakfast sometime soon.
Bill, I'm going to tell you, I appreciate you, calling me yesterday to let me know how much you liked it, because it meant a lot to me. Common Bond is something that a friend of mine, George Joseph, and I bought about 1 year and 3 months ago. And I've always been afraid of bakeries. I can brag on Common Bond because I didn't create it. A guy named Roy Schwartzapfel created it with another friend of mine named Brad Sanders. And they had a little partnership shake-up, and it was time for them to unload it. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity for me to start making bread for my restaurants, right?
Exactly.
But I have fallen in love with Common Bond. I really have. I wish I was a little bit younger, and I wish that I had the time, because I would love to embrace it and work it every day. But we have, I think we have the best viennoiserie, which is like your croissants and things like that. We have great bread, good pastry. We have a cake decorator over there named Karen.
I saw those cakes too.
She's an artist with her cakes. And then we have the savory part of it, and we have a chef by the name of Matt. And he's the one that made your beef bouillon the other day. But I just have a great team. Tamata, Jeff. It's all about the people.
It is the people. Johnny, with the last minute or so left, let's tell people what lies ahead that you'd want to talk about here for a minute or two. And if people go to just Google Johnny Carrabba or Carrabba's, all these restaurants will come up.
Yeah. Well, I have to keep my feet on the ground and stick to my roots. I've said, that I'm an operator. I think I can run a restaurant. I don't think I'm a businessman. I have to surround myself with good people to keep me in the restaurants. And I see you all the time, so I'm working the pavement. I do want to grow. I mean, I think Common Bond is one of the concepts I think that we just opened up a bread commissary yesterday to produce, wholesale bread. I think we can do some more retail, Common Bonds. But I have a little concept named after my daughter. It's named Mia's. And, you eat there.
I love that.
And Mia's is a concept that I've really put a great team together. And we're going to methodically grow it the right way. And my biggest deal is, we're 30 years old, and I still think that, we have some life in us. I think we're kicking on all cylinders. We're evolving. We're getting better each day. But my biggest threat is losing culture. If we lose our culture at our business, and our philosophies, but, just culture in general, we're going to, eventually die. And I hate to say that die sounds kind of a little critical in a talk show, but so what I'd work really hard on is I still do the final hiring and I still do the orientation of all my new employees, and I include some older employees. So I want to hold on to culture, and I want to provide for all my employees because they have given me their life. And I have so many employees that have been with me for 30 years, 25 years, 20 years. Longevity really is why we're successful, and it's up to me as a founding father, a father figure, is to make sure that I don't take my eye off the ball.
And it takes teamwork to make the dream work. And also, Johnny, your book is called With Gratitude. People should pick up the book, With Gratitude. They can go to the website and find it there, right?
You better believe it, or you can just come to Carrabba's on Kirby or Woodway or Grace's, and we have them there. And it's the history, the story, the culture, and more importantly, every employee that I've had for 15 years or longer, their pictures in that book, because I dedicated it to my two grandmothers, but it's really for my employees.
Excellent. Well, Johnny, thank you for being on Successful Living with Bill Knapik, and today with Johnny Carrabba. And until next week, thanks for being on the show, Johnny.
My pleasure, Bill. Thank you.